Hello, today we are moving on to our tonelico 1 Hymnos Concert Side Red, which is this CD right here. So we're looking at Shimotsuki Haruka's first hymn today, Exact Linka, but the hymns on Concert Side Red include both Shimotsuki Haruka's songs and Mitose Noriko's songs. So we will be hearing both of those throughout the next few weeks. So we are specifically starting with Exact Linka today. Exact Linka plays near the beginning of phase 2. Depending on whether you pick Misha's or Orca's route, you hear more of it and you get more of the background as to why she's singing it. If you pick Orca's route, you get to see her download the hymn crystal that Bishop Falls has, and you get to see her go to the altar of Apostles and start singing it. Whereas if you instead pick Misha's route, you realize something's up, and as you go towards where Orca and everybody is, you start to hear this music and you're like, what's going on? In either way, Linker actually overrides the overworld and battle music. So you enter an area and when you enter the area, all of a sudden Exact Linka starts. So if you leave and come back, the song starts over each time. But if you stay in the area, you get to hear the song loop without any pauses throughout the battle. When Orca has downloaded the hymn crystal and sings it, she thinks she's working on the Three Goddess Resurrection project, where they're going to awaken Aeolia, Frelia, and Tyria. However, Bishop Falls, as we find out later on in the game, is actually the bad guy, or one of the bad guys. He betrays everybody, and instead he is trying to summon Mir, and he works with Tenpa, which is really interesting because they're opposing factions, kind of. And Ayatane is a virus who works also towards this goal. So there's multiple factions working towards this goal, but this part of the goal, this is like the last step, is what they think is going to happen. Certainly that's not what happens. We have more of the game afterwards, and we thwart this plan. But the idea is to awaken Mir and actually have Mir take over Orca's body with this song in this part of the storyline. It actually does almost succeed. It is only thanks to Misha and Liner that they're able to prevent the takeover of Orca's body. Misha actually does this by beginning to sing Chronicle Key. So if you pick Misha's storyline, she goes and she recovers her decellophane, which has Chronicle Key in it. She begins to sing Chronicle Key, and Mir is suppressed, and that's how it happens. If you pick Orca's storyline, Misha appears with everybody who went with her, which is Jack and Crochet, and you realize, oh, Misha has her song back, and that's how that happens. The beginning of the song, like many actual hymns, which it's been a while since we've had a hymn. We've had some of Ishibashi Yuko's songs, which were entirely Japanese, and then we had a B-side in the middle, so it's been a while since we've talked about the hymnos language. But like many of the actual songs that are meant to be hymns, downloaded or otherwise, the very beginning of the song starts with the kind of overarching feeling like, Wasiarachis hymnos me type of a line that we've heard before. Specifically in Linker, it is Want Yasgagis chis hymnos me, which means I'm scared, but I'm fine with it becoming a song. So it does reveal a little bit of apprehension. This, even with it being the false story of the Three Goddess Resurrection plan, this is, still a big change. And, if anyone taking over your body is a big deal. And so Orca becoming a goddess and having one of the three goddesses come through her, and that's got to be terrifying. So she's scared, but she also believes in this plan, and so that's why she's okay with it. So there's this hesitation in this line, but overall she thinks, this is cool. I'm being part of something big. And Orca's big thing with her character is, she's a D-class Ravetel. She very much talks down on herself. She refers to herself multiple times as broken. Her cosmosphere is all about her lack of self-worth. And so, she probably, this is a way for her to show that she does amount to something and that she does have a purpose. And so she's happy to do so, but, you're always scared when something new happens. Now, certainly, once she realizes that it's actually Mir going to take over her, it's far too late to stop the song, and her emotions would certainly spiral that way. But we don't actually see that within the hymnos lyrics of the song, because the feelings contained in the song are what dictate how the song is going to be constructed. Certainly, the Ravetel pieces the parts together, but the emotions are the same. And so those emotions are already set by the time Orca then constructs a song from the crystal around it. So this song is known by people who've analyzed art tonelico music as having a different key signature, a key signature that does not fit standard convention. So this is one of the songs that actually does get talked about a lot. And as I was thinking of creating this project way back in the beginning of summer, when I was starting to throw around the ideas of, am I going to do this or not? This is actually the first song that I analyzed, just because I knew it had some of those different quirks that people had talked a lot about. And I'm like, is there even enough to talk about in a whole video? If I can't do it with Linker, I can't, like, this is the song that has the cool stuff. If I can't do it with Linker, I can't do it with anything. And so my notes actually are over a page long. This is where we get into the next song, because I have it all in one document. But certainly that it was good I picked this song because I had enough to talk about, and we will actually have a lot more to talk about than we could otherwise, just from a song perspective, because as this is Shimotsuki Haruka's first song, we're also going to talk about her vocal style and the differences she brings versus some of the other singers. When we talked about why Shikata Akiko and Ishibashi Yuko were chosen for the project, I also mentioned the other singers that we'll be hearing from on this CD, Shimotsuki Haruka and Mitoshi Noriko, were more known for their doujin work. Really, only Ishibashi Yuko was kind of the wildcard unknown. When Tsuchika Akira was recruiting the singers, he already had this idea. He knew about their talents, etc. And Shimotsuki Haruka is actually an interesting case because she had actually been working with Gust already. She sung the intro song for Atelier Iris 1, which had already come out, or was in the process of coming out when Art tonelico was in production. So there was already a precedent for working with her, and there was already a relationship there. Contracts had already been drawn, and so it was kind of like a no-brainer to move forward. And certainly, her talent and her voice does lend well to this type of music. She actually, as the series goes on, is able to sing in a lot of different distinct styles of music, and her songs tend to borrow more heavily outside of the standard realm. She has some songs that have some very Indian and some songs that have some very Middle Eastern flair that we'll hear that some of the other singers don't really attempt to do. And so her dexterity and flexibility in that way is really interesting. And some of it comes from the style of her using a more straight tone. And by more straight tone, I mean that she doesn't add a lot of embellishments and no vibrato at all. She sings in a very, she doesn't have a very breathy tone. She has a very clear, piercing tone without any embellishments on it. So that allows her to embellish in different ways by adding the dexterity and the flexibility, by doing some more things like you hear in solfege. That I can't do any of that. That was a very piss poor representation of what she was doing. But things that maybe some of the other singers, because they have more embellishments and they do more with dynamics, they do more with vibrato, and so trying to mix all that together would make that sound more muddled. But because of Shimotsuki Haruka's straight tone, she's able to perform some of these in a different way. Now, her Art tonelico 1 songs are all very straightforward and standard. We don't have a lot, if any, of that in these 3 songs that we're going to be talking about of hers. But I just do want to mention that she does bring a different set of techniques to the Exapico songs. All right, so we are going to have sheet music again. And I know it's been a while because this was again one of the hymns and one of the complex songs, and I wanted to, way back 16 years ago, try to separate the vocal lines. So we are going to start the song. The song structure is actually pretty straightforward, but because of the length of the different pieces, we don't have as much repetition as in a standard pop song, but we will have some repetition. There is a definite verse, pre-chorus, and chorus that we will hear. We will start with an intro, and then we will have a chant after that. Between the intro and the chant is where we will start to notice the key signature. So the song, as I mentioned, has a different key signature than normal. It actually, for the majority of the song, it's in 5/4 time. So instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is not very common. You could choose to write this in 5/8 time, as well. Either convention's fine. Because it's a non-standard time signature, there's no it has to be 5/4 or it has to be 5/8. I've seen both used for different types of songs. It depends on the convention, like many things in music. But our song does not actually start in 5/4. Our song actually does start in 4/4, which does lend to maybe, just so that you're not changing from a bass of a 4 to a bass of an 8, keeping it as a 5/4 rather than going from 4/4 to 5/8. You're going from 4/4 to 5/4, so you can keep that same quarter note as your beat rather than switching between your quarter note and eighth note being a beat. So we are going to start just with the intro and the chant to listen to, and then we'll see the sheet music. So we're going to go to the sheet music now, and once I get to the sheet music, this is where we're going to start talking about the features. So as you can see in the beginning here, this is indeed in 4/4. And if you're like, well, if the rest of the song is in 5/4, why have this in 4/4? The downbeats are really clear. You heard the cymbal on the downbeat, so it's really clear. There's no interpreting this other than being in 4/4 at the beginning here. So if you count the time signature at the beginning, and you can see it here, it is definitely in 4/4. And then we switch. Okay, so when we have non-standard time signatures, often they're like, what is this? They're jarring. They make us think, like, what's going on? Why is this not jarring? Why does this seem natural? The structure at the beginning of the song, yes, we had the definite downbeats from when the cymbal came in, a couple notes came in, but for the most part, that beginning part was a cappella. There wasn't a ton of structure. So once we come in with the chant, we have the piano in the background. Whatever it is, right? We have the piano coming in. We have more percussion coming in definitely on the downbeat. We have a lot more structure. So it just feels nice to have that structure, that we have something bringing everything together and moving things forward, rather than that intro where, yeah, there were some definite downbeats, but there wasn't a lot else to support the structure. So having that structure is really, really nice. And the idea of the structure is not unfamiliar. So as you notice, we have some dotted quarter notes. So a dotted quarter note is 1.5 beats. So usually in 4/4 we have, this is a common rhythm. So we have 1, 1, and 2, and 3, 1, and 2, and, right? So 1 and 2, 1, yeah. All right, we have a very common structure where we do this, and other tonelico songs will actually have that structure where that last beat is gone, but we still have that dotted quarter note on the first and the 2.5 beat. So this is a really, really common structure, even without that extra beat in it. So it seems still really familiar to have this. It's a very common syncopated beat. Bum, 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 bum. That syncopation, it means you don't have all your notes on the beats, which isn't a big contrast. We haven't had a lot of syncopation yet. Both harmonious and chronicle key very, very heavily featured everything being on the beat. Far out on way, right? Everything was on the beat. Chronicle key was the same way. We just chronicle key and grande, right? Was also on the beat, especially once you get into the chorus. So having this syncopation is really, really new, but at the same time, it's a very common syncopation, so it feels really natural to have it here. And so the 5/4 beat doesn't feel completely like out of it. There are some songs that we will hear in the ex Pico universe where that non-standard time signature sounds completely out of left field, and it makes it so that it's actually hard to even determine the time signature. That's really when you can tell that a time signature is not settling right, if you can't even figure out what it is. A song that is well structured and that doesn't feel jarring, you can tell what's going on with it. Whereas when the song gets jarring and it starts dropping beats or adding beats or has a time signature and you can't figure it out, that's the weird stuff. And we will have some of those, and some of that is building an atmosphere and an emotion in the listener on purpose, and some of that is just how the song shook out once everything was put together. I can't really tell you what the composers were thinking in those cases. Certainly not an atmosphere or unless I were intending that atmosphere of that chaos and confusion, I certainly wouldn't go on if I were composing the song, go for that sort of a thing. But Ex-Apico songs are known for being a bit out of the norm, for being very creative and being very forward thinking and progressive in the way that instruments and vocals and rhythms are used. And so it's not unexpected that we'd have some cases that are jarring and unfamiliar, not because the song wants to be jarring or unfamiliar. That's just how it shook out. Okay. So notice also this is feeling pretty upbeat. However, we are in a minor key. We are in A minor. And you might say, how do you know you're in A minor? When definitely it feels happy. So notice the first line, is ending on A, so it's ending on that tonic. And the chant here, we're starting, that's a D minor chord, but we're ending on the C major, but transitioning out of it. So we're getting to the C major at the end of the chant, but we're leaving it right away because it's not going to that downbeat again to resolve. It's when we move on to the verse there. And the verse does indeed start on that A, that tonic of the minor key. So definitely I would say this is in a minor key despite being upbeat. Remember, as I've stated, we've only had one song in a major key. And it was a very soft and subdued song because otherwise the major key would have sounded very overpowering. We've had other happy-like songs. Harmonious was arguably a pretty happy song in a minor key. I mean, definitely Harmonious, there's a lot going on with it, but it's about, seeing the beauty in humanity, right? And it's about Mir's feelings of thankfulness and gratefulness towards humanity. That's a happy emotion, right? So definitely we've had happy songs in minor keys before. This is not anything new. All right, so let's go back and let's listen through the first verse here. Verse. And before I get to the sheet music, I want to use this to talk more about Shimotsuki Haruka's straight style. So I mentioned previously especially when we talked about Ishibashi Yuko's songs, vibrato is used for three purposes. It's used at the end of lines to give color for an ending note. It's used for high notes because it's hard to hit some of those notes otherwise. And it's used for long notes so they don't get boring, even if they're in the middle of a line. Certainly some of these are pretty high notes in this first verse already, yet she doesn't have any vibrato here. So she's singing, right? Without any vibrato, which I actually, I struggled. I kind of cracked on some of those higher notes because I'm not used to singing them without vibrato. So because she was able to push through with such a straight tone, she didn't struggle or fall apart on that run, which is pretty hard to do. That's that little trill there. Right, there's even a skipped note in there. It doesn't just go chromatically or through the scale like most runs do. She even skipped and is doing more than just a whole step on one of those gaps, and we'll see that in the sheet music. And so that's a lot harder to do, especially if you have other things competing like vibrato. So I'm not sure. The notes are very quick, And so I'm not sure you could really could be what it could sound like with vibrato. I was a lot more confident in that way singing it through because I was more used to singing it with vibrato, but I still had to think through it and overthink it, and so it still didn't come out perfectly. But that's an example of how vibrato would have changed the sound of this line. So let's go through, and I know it's only a few lines, so it won't take us long to get through. The verse starts off just with the melody line and then just has a little bit of harmony and counter melody coming in later on. You notice there's some staccatos in the sheet music. I think that's just an artifact of, this is not the program I wrote the sheet music in. I didn't even have this computer, obviously, when I wrote the sheet music. I was on a PC, not a Mac, and it was multiple generations ago. It was a Windows Vista computer, I think it was. Back then, I don't think 7 had, maybe it was 7. I think 7 might have just come out, actually. I think it was Windows 7, actually. Either way, the program, they don't even make it anymore. So I don't think those staccatos actually are meant to actually be staccatos. But a staccato is when you hit a note and then you back off right away, whereas otherwise we tend to play notes legato, which means we kind of connect them, especially when we sing, because we're not stopping our breath after every note. Right? Like, we're not stopping. All right, you're not stopping after every note, you're connecting them together. So I'm assuming those staccatos, they certainly didn't seem like they fit with where they had been placed. So I think that's just artifacts. So please ignore the staccatos here. And then you notice there were quite a few accidentals, especially in the counter melody. We are transitioning to a key change, big surprise, right? And we're actually transitioning to a major key. So as I said, we don't want this to be obnoxious, and so we started off in a minor key, but we are going to have some major key splashes here and there because the tone of this song, and it is audibly a happy song. So we're going to have some happier parts with some actual like major key parts, but for the most part, we're gonna keep going back to that A minor as like a basis, and then we're gonna be switching away from it here and there a little bit. So we are going to now do, we're going to do the pre-chorus and the chorus. So the pre-chorus will be in F major, and then the chorus will be in E flat major. That was the pre-chorus and the chorus. So you might say those are both really short parts, which they were. Callie, why are you separating them, the pre-chorus and chorus? First of all, there's a key change between them, so it's just really nice to have. It's a really easy way to separate them. Second, they do have different feels and different melodies. They don't really feel that connected, so separating them makes sense just from a structural standpoint. But honestly, it's just what you want to do. It's completely arbitrary. The way music, and I might have mentioned this before, music tends to define a chorus as a catchy part, a repeated part. And so in Western music, the chorus will have the same lyrics. Now in Japanese music, the chorus tends to have different lyrics each time. At least in the J-pop music I've heard. So we can't use that as a strict definition, like it's the same melody and the same lyrics. That doesn't really work as well anymore. And so because of that, it is, like I said, very arbitrary. But, the hook of the song, the hook of the chorus that gets you to want to sing along, should be part of the chorus. Anything leading up to that, if it sounds different, it should be the pre-chorus, but it really is convention and what you want to do with it. The next thing I want to talk about is, again, I want to highlight the differences just because I do sing naturally with vibrato, especially on higher notes, and so I can very clearly show the differences. Here, especially when she sings in the chorus, she sings higher, longer notes again, not just higher, but also longer notes, and so it would sound very different with vibrato. So, right, it has a very different sound. I don't even know if I could sing it straight because that's just not how I sing. And of course, I did not warm up for this video, so you obviously heard a little cracking there. My bad. I've been in a lot of meetings today too, so I've been talking a lot, and so this is definitely not helping. So this part would definitely sound very differently if, say, Ishibashi Yuko would have sung it, or Mitose Noriko would have sung it, especially seeing as Mitose Noriko's vibrato is very, very wide and almost sounds uncontrollable in some ways, whereas Ishibashi Yuko's vibrato, it does sound a bit more constrained and controlled. So that would also sound very different on some of these phrases, to have those two different styles. So let's switch to the sheet music for the pre-chorus and chorus. So part of the pre-chorus here was still in A minor, right? We had no key change. And then I miswrote. This is B flat major. My apologies, not F major. F major is only one flat. B flat major is two flats. My notes, I was going probably too fast. So we have, this is in B flat major. And we can definitely see, there's a lot of, we do have the B flat as the bass note here. We do have the B flat here, but we also see that it does provide a really good transition into E flat major because that fifth for the E flat chord is already present, which is another reason why am I making these distinctions between minor and major chords? Honestly, there's so little time in this key. There's a handful of measures. Really, it doesn't matter. This key does not matter. Honestly and truly, you could have put the sharps, you could have put the flats here as an accidentals and just had the one key change for the chorus, or done the chorus key change already and put accidentals in. I mean, there already is an accidental here, for goodness sakes. Like, literally, in terms of writing this key change is purely transitional. It does not matter how we write it. It does not matter that if we even notate it. We could honestly say at this point that we've already moved to E flat major, and it would have been a perfectly fine way to say it. I am mostly just being honestly pedantic at this point that I even separated it out. But there are plenty of cases where here's an A natural right here, here's an A natural right here. We have some more over here. There are more A naturals than there are anything else. More A naturals and no A flats here, which is why I'm like, technically, if we separated it out, I would have to say, technically, actually, right? I mean, I'm being pretentious and pedantic again at that point. But for the sake of completion and comprehensiveness, I have to mention it is in B flat major. But really, if I were the one who composed this, I don't even know if I'd make the distinction personally, especially if all I'm going to do is record this and never play this live, which is what happens with these songs. Like, I'm just going to record it and move past it. I don't even know if I'd care to notate this as an extra key change. But that is technically what's happening here. And then in more of the chorus here we are certainly, again, this is a very short section with this key. Maybe this too, doesn't even matter, right? Again, I'm being pretentious and pedantic just for the sake of completion, but honestly, if I were composing this, I would have picked this whole part to be in one key and accidental the rest. Whichever key I picked, I don't know that it really matters, honestly. But that's what's happening right now. Let's see. What else do I want to talk about here? The harmony is pretty sparse. We have just pretty much 1 or 2 lines once we get past this intro part of the pre-chorus, which is more chant-like. And then we have, this is a counter melody. If not for the way some of these notes are held, I could have even put them on the same lines as the other parts. And like before, I really tried to separate this as melody, soprano 1, 2, alto 1, 2. But as you can see, the alto 1 part goes higher than soprano 1 part, which doesn't make any sense. So really, ignore the fact that things are on different or on particular lines. It's more just for separation purposes so that they're not all stuck together. And then as we get to the chorus, we start to have some accidentals, which makes perfect sense because we're transitioning back to our original key of A minor. We're going to go back, we've had our verse, pre-chorus, chorus. We're going to get back to the verse eventually, but we do have a post-chorus section that leads back into the I'm sorry, like I said, I've been in a lot of meetings and talked a lot today already. We're going to get to a post-chorus section that allows us to transition back to that intro chant really well. But if you notice, there is a little hint here that this is a not very standard, we're messing with time signatures, sorry. We're messing with time signatures again. And so we're definitely going to hear there is going to be some difference going on here. Let's listen to it and then we'll analyze the sheet music of it. Post-chorus segment, everything else in this song is just a repeat of something we saw previously. From this moment onwards, there's no new content in the song. And so this provides a really good way to loop, which we will talk about obviously because this is a song that does loop. Again, it overrides overworld and battle music, so certainly it has to have some loop. You could literally walk away from your controller and this song can play for an hour. It has to have some way to do that. So let's go back to the sheet music to see what this last unique bit looks like. So notice again, we're going to have some time signature shenanigans. So before I get into anything, I do want to talk about the time signatures, but I want to talk mostly about the keys first. I already mentioned that we went back to A minor, and you're like, Kelly, there are tons of flats in here. Are you sure? Again, this is a post-chorus. We've had a lot of sections with short keys, key signatures that really have only been 8, 12 measures long. You could call that all, transitional. You could put the accidentals in and say it's all one key. It's a lot of the same here, whether this went back to A minor now or it goes back to A minor later. You have to make a choice when you write music. I can't write something as both in one key and another key at the same time. I have to pick something to write. And so I chose, just simply because of how this started, where it starts, there's a flat here, but then it accidentals right away, right? Like we even get a sharp in here, right? Like we didn't have any sharps before. We were in purely keys with flats, right? So there's obviously things going on that are non-standard, but look at all of this that didn't need accidentals and this is like the base, the foundation, this chant piece underneath. And so that's kind of what I base this around. The base chant piece underneath is clearly until this little part here at the end, clearly in A minor. It doesn't have, we would have already had the E flat on the second measure if we would have stayed in one of the previous keys, either of the previous keys. So that tells me right there, I'm like, okay, what is providing the foundation chords and providing the rhythm is clearly does not need these flatted. So either it's in a key that only B is flat because there's no B here to tell, or it's in A minor, which is a key we've already had. What is more likely, to introduce yet another new key or go back to a key we've already had? Now, granted, there is a B flat here, right? And we've already had some key changes. It's an tonelico song, for goodness sakes. You're going to have key changes. You're going to have things that are non-standard. It would not be out of the realm of possibility to stick G minor in here, or not G minor, sorry, to stick F major in here, right? That's the mistake I made earlier. But like, it just makes sense, especially also if we look at the very end, right before we get back to the intro chant. This fourth is an inverted fifth of the A minor chord. So I'm like, okay, you could say that's part of just the transition to A minor. I'd say I picked this when I was writing this because I thought, we're already in an uncertain area right here. And we end this with the key that we're going to transition to. And it makes sense to keep it in that key. So I'm just going to do it. I have to pick something. This is what I picked. You could have picked, if you would have done this, definitely this could have potentially gone the other way. There are definitely multiple B flats in here, right? Here's two more, right? Here's another one. There's a lot of E naturals in here, right? So here's one, here's one, here's one, right? Here, that's an F. So yeah, this could have been F major. There are arguments both ways. So don't take this as this is most certainly in A minor. This could have been written either way, in A minor with some accidentals or in F major, and then we transition back to A minor. Either way works. Again, we have a B flat and then we accidental it later on. Who knows? Looking at this 16 years after writing it, I think the argument for F major might actually be a little bit stronger than I thought when I first put this together, but I wasn't going to mess with any of this. I already had the work done. I was just going to go with it. And again, a lot of this is convention. And do we want to make so many key changes that it's hard to follow? Because that's the other thing. If you're playing this on an instrument and you're constantly switching keys on the sheet music, you're constantly readjusting your default framing. It's one thing to throw in accidentals all over the place where you're constantly being reminded, oh, that's an accidental. I need to make sure that's different. But if you're changing that foundation on every 8 measures or every 12 measures, you're resetting your brain every time. And that can be difficult too from a playing an instrument perspective. And since, again, this was never meant to be played live, does that even matter? I don't know, right? I am not Tsuchiya Akira. I can't tell you these answers, but I can tell you what the notes seem to suggest. And they suggest that it could go either way, probably more likely F major if I were to have redone this again, but I was not going to redo this again. The next thing I want to talk about here is before, again, I will talk about the key changes. I want to talk about this here. So we start, both of these are the same note, right? But then I split it. That sounds like ass if you put it by itself, right? It's the beating of chopsticks, right? It is meant to sound something called dissonant. And what's happening here is we're taking a note and we're pulling away from it. In the same way that chopsticks does. And so what's happening here is we're getting this, I have a foundation of a D, right? I'm setting that tone, I'm setting that stage. My root note in these few measures, in these chords, in whatever's going on here is this D. But I want some movement and I want to create a little tension and release. So I'm gonna slowly move away from that D. I'm playing the wrong notes, but you get the idea, right? I was playing C and D, not D and E, but the idea there is the same. So by creating that tension and release, I'm creating that some sort of difference. I am giving the ear something to kind of pay attention to tense up and relax a bit about, and it moves the piece along. The rhythm also being highly syncopated is also moving the piece along. Now, let's talk a bit about the time signatures. Why on earth are we going to 6/4 and then 7/4 and then 6/4 and then 7/4 and 6/4 and then we go back to 5/4? First of all, like if you wanted to keep the whole thing in 5/4, you'd have to add the beats to make sure it is a multiple of 5. I'm not doing that here right now just because I want to get through the video. But second, what I think is even more telling is look at the way the rhythm is repeated. So we have these 3 bars are all bum bum ba bum bum bum, and then we have bum bum ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. Symmetry is really important in music. It's why we like to have a lot of the same chord patterns all the time. It's why we like to repeat our choruses all the time, right? If everything sounds different every time, it's going to be a jumbled mess of notes that doesn't make any sense to our ears. And so a lot of times, especially if this is an underlying rhythm, right? This isn't the melody, this is the foundation, and then she's singing on top of it. So we don't want this to be crazy way out of left field. And so we're going to have some repetition. Putting the measures and aligning them with that repetition is the easiest way of organizing music. That's why even if a song is in 4/4, a single line is often 4 or 8, which are both multiple of 4s, measures long, because we like that symmetry. Oh, each measure is 4 beats. Well, each line is also a multiple of 4 measures, right? We have that symmetry there, and that's what's happening here as well. Now, we have pieces that don't match. We have an extra beat. We had that 6/4, 3 measures in a row. That's 18 beats. So that doesn't work with a 5/4 anyway. You can't restructure that. And then we have an extra beat on top of that. So we have 18 plus 7 does get us to 25. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to write this in 5/4 because of the structure. And if you notice, even her notes on top are not in sets of 5 either. This is 4 beats. This is 6 beats. This is 6 beats. This is 6 beats. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then another 6 beat or a dotted whole note. So her melody, which is really what's driving a lot of things in this song as well, that's what we're paying the most attention to, doesn't fit the 5/4 either. And then we come back to that rhythm when we repeat it, and then we have another 7/4. So technically we have a second set of 25 beats, right? 6 times 3 is 18. 18 plus 7 is 25. Just double checking, right? But then here, when we come back into 6/4, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 measures of 6/4. And 8 times 6 is 48, which does not divide by 5. So either way, we would have to have, even if we kept the 5/4 in the first 2 sets of 25, which again does not really make rhythmic sense based on where the patterns lie, we would be completely screwed at this point, because look, each note is half a measure or a full measure here anyway, and we don't have a number of beats divisible by 5. So even just purely mathematically, which music is applied mathematics, if you didn't know, purely mathematically, it makes no sense to keep it in 5/4, no matter if you're looking at pattern recognition, if you're looking at counting the number of beats in the measure, if you're looking at counting the number of beats in the line, if you're looking at dividing the total number of beats in the set of measures by 5. It doesn't make sense either way. So that is why we have this 6/4, 7/4, 6/4, 7/4, 6/4 change. Now, 6/4 and 7/4 are really uncommon. More common are 6/8 and 7/8. We don't like to change the bottom number ever, because just like if we're changing key signatures too often, changing time signatures also requires some sort of mental reset. Not nearly as much if we only change the top number, but if we change that bottom number, we're changing what note corresponds to the beat. So now we're changing, if we go from 6/4 to 6/8, are we saying a quarter note now lasts twice as long? That is exactly what we're saying, because we're saying the beat is changing from the quarter note to the 8th note, and now you're having to reset how your brain works. Whereas otherwise, it's just how much you count each measure, which certainly can be reset, but if you have a good internal clock, that is actually very quick to do, and it's not nearly as much of an issue, especially if it's a 1-off or 2-off measures, which many key changes tend to be 1-off or 2-off measures. Having a long segment like this is very uncommon. So this is definitely out of the norm when usually we have like an extra beat here or a dropped beat here, not segments with multiple key changes like this. This is very, very rare. But in general, change in the top number, okay. Change in the bottom number, not. And so if we were to want this to be in 6/8 and 7/8, which are much more common, the song from the beginning would have had to have been in 5/8, which is certainly possible, except then the beginning would have to be in 4/8, which I've literally never seen in my life. That is incredibly uncommon. So I'm not saying I've really seen 6/4 or 7/4 either, but I feel like I have the potential to see them a bit more than seeing a 4/8. So that is why this convention was chosen. From here on in, we are going to get a lot of repetition. We're back in A minor for sure this time. Again, up until this point, the argument can be made. We're going to have the intro chant, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, and then we're going to get to an outro. So you can see we are exactly halfway through the song. That's the button I want to press. We're exactly halfway through the song, and we've had, we're going to have mostly everything repeated. The only thing is, instead of a post-chorus at the end, we have an outro at the end. So we're pretty much going to listen to the rest of this in full and then go back to the sheet music because there's not going to be a lot to talk about. It's going to be a lot of the same things again. So now we're going to go to the sheet music and finish things off. Okay. So again, we're going to do intro chant, verse 2, pre-chorus, chorus, and then instead of going to a chorus, we're going to go to the outro. In the in-game loop, by the way, at this point, we go back to the intro chant right after the intro. So the majority of the song is just that little bit of the intro, part at the end. And then the actual outro. Those are the only parts you don't hear the outro at all in game, and you only hear that intro once, and it's actually the majority of the song is the loop. exception of just like one or two just melody differences just because of the number of syllables on the line, identical. All the pieces, all the harmonies are in the same spots, all the counter melodies match up, everything is the exact same. And then it's just the structure of going to the intro chant and doubling it rather than the post-chorus. The other thing that this does not capture is dynamic changes. And on the intro chant, when it gets played at the end, you might have been like, wow, that came in really loud. I don't remember that being right away. I remember hearing the piano riff that... right? I remember hearing that a lot more. There's a fade in on that intro chant at the end, right? So the piano is definitely louder and you hear that bong, that gong, or whatever it is, that bell. Probably a bell, not a gong. The bell, a gong is bigger and round. Where a bell is, right? And the bell can have multiple pitches. A gong tends to be deeper in sound. Anyway, you hear the bell and you hear the piano, and then the chant comes in and increases in volume until it's at the very end, and then everything else fades away and and then it ends, right? So that's why it sounds a little bit differently here. So usually we don't do a lot of fade-ins in music. We do a lot of fade-outs in music, especially at the end of songs if we don't know how to end a song or something's just going to loop anyway and we don't need to write an ending. But a fade-in is much less common. And what happens in a fade-in is when we want to ramp something up or we want to introduce something gradually. But we're at the end of a song. Why do we want to ramp up or do something, introduce something gradually? This isn't a new thing. We've already had this chant twice now. In the beginning of the song, right after the intro, we've had the chant after the post-chorus before the verse 2. So we're not introducing it, and so we don't need to, right? You don't need to like ease us into it. We know this chant really well by now. And again, the song's about to end. What are we ramping up towards? We're ramping up towards a big finish is what we're doing. And right, we're really emphasizing the chant. Now a chant, if you think about what is the purpose of a chant, when I think of chant, I think of I'm singing something very repetitive, right? That's what a chant is. I tend to think of when I was younger, I grew up very religious. I'm not anymore, but I grew up very religious, and we would sing a lot of the same chants every week at Sunday Mass. And so that repetitiveness, that trance-like, that is what I feel is very much happening. And certainly, there is something to that here. Like she's trying to revive the goddesses, and if you read the lyrics, I don't blame you if you didn't. We were trying to focus on the music. The lyrics of the chant are, one girl is singing to you, come now revive into me, right? So it's really emphasizing that mythological, more religious imagery. And so I definitely get that feeling. And we will have chants that don't have that iconography in later parts of the series. Like, especially our tonelico 3, Metempsychosis has some great chants. Vibashi Majira has some, I can't pronounce that one with crap, by the way. That has some great chanting in it. So chanting does not have to come alongside religion, but it certainly, that's the message I get. And I get that, again, because it's trance-like, it's meant to be repetitive, it's meant to put you in that state and make you think of something that's not just yourself. And so I think that is what this is doing here. And so ending it on that note is like, look, this is really the goal of the song. This is really what we're doing, is what this chant is working towards. Remember, the chant is in the hymnos, whereas like the chorus and the pre-chorus and the verses were in Japanese, which doesn't detract from their meaning. But the actual literal translation lyrics of the hymnos is the point of the song, if you read the Abstract Garden translation, which, by the way, doesn't translate the emotion words, which is why at the beginning, want ya skagis chisumnos me, you're like, where did that emotion of I'm apprehensive but I'm willing to turn, like where did that part go into? That it's not part of the translation on these videos that I'm using. I just really like some of the translations of these, and I like the simplicity of the videos a lot. They don't detract from the music. Sometimes when people make lyric videos, they're really flashy, or they have a lot of images on them, and that distracts from. I wanted to be very clear that we're focusing on the actual notes and melodies and harmonies and instrumentation, not necessarily the context is important, but you can go read the Wikipedia article for more of that, or you could play the game to get the whole story. I want to talk about the individual components of everything going into the song. And so I didn't want like some of the videos that do more of that. I didn't want that to detract. But anyway, it does mean that we don't get those emotional words translated. But the actual like translation of what the rest of those hymnos lines I think really emphasize, like that is the purpose of the song. And so ending on that and building up towards that, it's like we're really like emphasizing that purpose a lot. I think that makes a lot of sense for why we would end it this way. And we have to end a song some way, right? And, we're backing off on the instrumentation and we're ending on the vocals. And so, yeah, ramp up to that vocal ending. And those last, if we look at the ending notes, it is an unresolved, right? You could say, A minor's sister key is C major. Potentially you could say this is ending on a C major, and so it is resolved if you want to interpret this as in a major key. With this song going between major and minor and having all the accidentals, again, a lot of those choices are just convention, arbitrary, what the person who transcribed it or composed it, or actually wrote it down when composing wanted to do. Maybe this is C major, that's fine. Yes, Simba, you want to play too? So it doesn't sound resolved to me, which is why I really hesitate against this being C major. It sounds like we built up to something and then we just let it go. And you're still having that, like, I want that chant to repeat, which is what a chant does. A chant repeats. So ending on a chant, you're like, where's the repeated part? Why isn't this going again? Which is the reason why I was kind of hesitant and not thinking it was C major. But that is what's going on with the ending of this song, which is not a great explanation. I know I kind of hand-waved a little bit of that. As not the composer, I don't have all the inner workings of why this is this way, but it makes sense with this explanation to me, at least. So, the next song we're going to talk about next week. So I know we skipped a week with the videos just because of technical issues, but we are going to be getting back on our normal schedule starting from this video. And so as we look through and we look ahead to what are we going to have, we're going to have 3 hymns by Shimotsuki Haruka right in a row. We're going to have Linker, then Orca's Perjure, and then Renation. And then we're going to have both of Mitose Noriko's hymns right in a row, Suspend and Rigveda. And then we're going to, right before we do a B-side, we're going to end on a B-side, which I know feels really weird. But we're going to have Phantasmagoria as the last actual hymn we talk about. And then we're going to have the B-side of Playing the Moon, Tsukikadare, but forget that. It's going to be a nice little bookend to, we started this analysis with singing harmonics earlier. We're going to almost end with exact Phantasmagoria. So I hope that you are as excited about that as I am. But we won't be done with our tonelico one yet. We have the OVA CDs and the Claire and Spica Hymnos musical too. So still plenty to look forward to, even if we're halfway through the in-game music. And we have I'll have 3 videos about OST songs as well. I'm separating, I have 2 OST songs for the first video, 2 for the second, and 2 for the third. So we'll have 3 videos about songs from the OST as well. So we will see you in the next couple Mondays.